many people would say that the whole Me Too movement, which has sort of exploded over the past year and a half now, I think, has been an immense force for good and real kind of like empowerment and just, instilling, creating a sense of justice at long last for so many people who have been victims of sexual abuse and power and been manipulated to do things that they wouldn't otherwise have wanted to do, but for the sake of, building their career, whatever, or pressure or fear, intimidation. So I don't think anyone's in any doubt about that. I'd ask the question, do you think there are any drawbacks at all to the Me Too movement? Two that some have claimed have been, number one, that people, well, I think this actually ties into, both points tie into each other, which is basically believing the accuser no matter what, that being the presumption. We used to have presumption of innocence, but now there are people saying you have to believe the accuser. And I understand that point, because how horribly indignifying is it to not believed when you experience something privately on your own, where it's a horrible thing not to be believed, but at the same time you're getting to a situation, some would argue, where men are starting to feel scared and even nervous of behaving in a totally consensual way. Is that a word? Consensual? I don't know. Behaving in a... Men are getting to a point, some would argue, that they feel a bit nervous about, will they be accused of something? Maybe they're doing things in relationships which are totally legitimate, but they'd be concerned they're going to be misunderstood. So what do you think? Do you think there are any drawbacks to this whole Me Too thing?
Well, look, every force for the good has the potential at its fringe to push a bit too far, but Me Too, I don't think, as you said, I don't think anyone could doubt it's been an incredible force for the good. A real rethink of how far the 1960s revolution went. Was free love, free sex, free everything really actually another masculinist push and another, in different guise really. But especially what it's like to be not just a woman but a man as well potentially, although generally it's more often women than men, who are abused in all sorts of ways, from the way people talk to the way people touch, to invasive, to comments, to all sorts of things that are sexually exploitative, often in positions where in the past people have felt alone and so forth. So it's phenomenal. That's great. Maimonides says sometimes you need to push the other extreme to get back to things in balance in general. I do think there is a deeper question, which I was alluding to before, which is once you divorce sexuality from commitment, then we do need to work out, well, what are the rules? In Torah, they're very clear, because the sexual relationship is entirely concentrated into the committed marriage. That's where it belongs. It doesn't really go anywhere else. In a society,
you can still get abuse though within a marriage.
Of course you can.
Yeah.
Of course you can. But I'm just saying, in wider society, those boundaries are less clear, and therefore I think there's going to be a need to work out, well, what are the parameters and boundaries? And if you like, some people had thought they were one way. The college campus culture, it was fun to put numbers up labeling women. It was fun to get people drunk to the point where consent starts to become murky. And now I think people are going to have to work out, well, what are the rules? They're not so clear. Well, good, because they weren't good before, And in the end of the day, sexual relationship is intimacy. It's intimacy, it's vulnerability, it's so personal. People being judged by mean bodies. I would hope that eventually the Me Too movement will get to, well, let's not have women half naked on billboards. That's another form.
Starting to move there.
I think it should. And again, you want to, freedom of speech societies and fear of religious oppression coming in that way and so forth. Okay. But even from a secular perspective, let's understand that abuse takes place at many, many, many levels, and there's tones that are set in society, and that's what a lot of people think confusion. But that was normal. So society has to learn to talk differently, and that means we have to think very differently. Should it be allowed that a woman gets a job because of shape of her body, or a man asks explicitly for that, Should it be that there's pressure to dress in ways that are revealing? And how do you counteract that exactly without rules? So that's tough one. In a liberal secular society, it's not easy. But certainly the direct, immediate issue that the Me Too movement raised, which is, look, there are real things happening in workplaces. There are real things happening all over the place in every part of society where men feel a certain right and they feel there's a certain open door that is actually deeply damaging, hurtful. That don't follow that. And I don't think it's right to start looking at, well, but there's a fringe. You see, part of the problem is that if somebody says, oh, but they went too far, it's almost like a way of saying, therefore ignore the whole movement.
Exactly,
and you've got to be so careful of that.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, it's a real important realignment movement, and that's critical.
But you're saying that a way to improve things dramatically is if sexuality is confined to marriage.
Look, the Torah sets a very serious standard, and that won't solve all the problem, as you pointed out before. Secular society has to wrestle with these things because it's functioning for different set of premises. It's unrealistic to expect tomorrow it's going to keep the whole of Torah, right? And I don't know, we're not a proselytizing religion, how much we would ask the whole world to do it. But I'm just saying that there is something to the fact that
even just committed relationships, you'd say.
Committed relationships are exactly that would be a huge step forward if it was understood societally that if you want, that is something that belongs to committed relationships and not to one night use of each other. Now the problem is, in a liberal world, you don't want to restrict consent.
Yes.
It's a very risky line to take, and that's where, so the definitions of consent have to be stronger. Is being drunk consent? What happens if you've had some kind of relation? These get very, very tough. They're not easy issues. And yes, some people use from a religious perspective to critique Western civilization. I think that's not without some merit. I think there are points where you can see there are weaknesses, but I don't think the solution tomorrow is going to be the rapid. It's just not on the cards that everyone suddenly takes on a Torah standard. So, but you're asking me. But I think we've moved very far from the question. I do think there's going to have to be. I do think the world needs to understand that respect for women doesn't just mean respect for their careers. Right? It means understanding the way male brains typically relate to things. There was a study a few years ago that showed when a man sees a woman with limited clothes on, the part of the brain that illuminates isn't the part that deals with humans, but with tools. But the same doesn't work in reverse. Now that changes when they're in a respected relationship, they know them already and so forth. So there's, we need to recognize that exists. And the question is, what do you do with all that? How do you deal with it when you want to also maintain a liberalism? All think the Me Too movement said is, well, this has gone way too far, okay? And not only has it gone too far, there's so many people who can't speak out about the amount of sexual abuse taking place, and the multitude of forms it takes place in, and that's not right. And let's speak about it, let's put it right, shine the light, bang on it, see what is going on. Now we can all debate and discuss what are the causes. Is it realistic just to say, well, let everything keep going exactly as it is, just say no earlier? Maybe. Is it that we need much better teaching in schools and film things? Do we need to start thinking about advertising industry? Do we need to speak about how exploitation of women takes place? Maybe. I think the Jewish instinct would be to extend that conversation much further. But I think all this takes away from, no matter where we want to go in trying to work out the solution, highlighting the issue, letting people feel heard, and letting them feel they're not alone, and letting the society say you should not be ashamed for the victim, because often there is that confusion of, well, it was semi-consensual. You don't need to be ashamed of what somebody else did wrong to you and abused their power over you, and you should be heard, respected for it. That's great, and that is worth stopping just there.
To stay up to date with JTV content, click subscribe here if you're on YouTube and hit the alarm bell. And if you're on Facebook, hit the like button, and under following, click see first. If you enjoy watching JTV content and want to help us continue to grow, please consider making a donation to us by clicking here.